I trusted my husband with my life. I trusted my home with my future. But the first one to realize something was wrong wasn't me. It was my dog. And by the time I understood what he was trying to warn me about, I was already running out of time. I used to believe safety was something you built slowly, brick by brick, inside a marriage. Shared routines. Shared secrets. Shared silence at the end of a long day. My life with my husband, Michael, looked like that kind of safety from the outside. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing dramatic ever happened. I worked remotely as a medical billing specialist, and Michael managed logistics for a regional shipping company. Normal jobs. Normal lives. Or so I thought. The one constant I trusted without question was my dog, Raven. She was a black Labrador with intelligent eyes and a calm temperament. I adopted her before I met Michael, and she'd been my shadow ever since. Raven didn't bark much. She didn't scare easily. Fireworks, thunderstorms, strangers at the door, none of it ever rattled her. She observed the world quietly, carefully, like she was always processing more than she showed. For the first 3 years of our marriage, Raven adored Michael. She followed him around the house, slept near his side of the bed, and waited by the door when his car pulled into the driveway. That changed one night without warning. Michael came home late, well after midnight. I was half asleep when I heard the garage door open. Raven lifted her head instantly. Her body went rigid. A low sound vibrated in her chest, not quite a growl, but close enough to make my stomach tighten. When Michael stepped into the bedroom, Raven stood between us. "Raven," I whispered. "It's just Michael." She didn't move. Michael frowned. "What's wrong with her?" I shrugged it off, blaming the late hour. "Stress. A bad dream. Dogs pick up on things, right? That's what people always say." But Raven never went back to normal. Over the following weeks, she began tracking Michael's movements obsessively. Wherever he went, her eyes followed. If he stood behind me, she shifted closer. If he reached toward me suddenly, she tensed. At night, she stopped sleeping near his side of the bed and instead pressed herself against my legs, alert and watchful. Michael noticed. "She's acting aggressive," he said one evening. "Maybe you should get her checked." "She's not aggressive," I replied. "She's scared." "Of me?" He laughed, but there was irritation underneath. The first strange object appeared a few days later. Raven trotted into my home office and dropped something at my feet. It was a small plastic vial with a pharmacy label. My name was printed on it in clean black letters. The medication listed wasn't something I recognized. I hadn't filled any prescriptions recently. When I asked Michael about it, he barely hesitated. "Probably from when you got sick last winter. You forget things sometimes." I didn't forget medical details. That was literally my job. After that, Raven began refusing food from Michael's hand. She wouldn't take treats. She wouldn't respond to his voice. If he raised his tone even slightly, she backed away and trembled. One night, I woke up to the feeling of someone watching me. Michael was sitting up in bed, staring at my face in the dark. "I couldn't sleep," he said quickly. Raven growled softly. Another week passed, and the tension in the house became unbearable. Michael started sleeping on the couch. He complained constantly about Raven, about her behavior, about how she was turning on him. I started noticing other things too. Michael's phone was always face down. He took calls outside. He kept the door to his home office locked. One afternoon, while Michael was at work, Raven began pawing at the laundry room wall. She whined, paced, then scratched harder. When I pulled the washer forward, I found a hidden compartment in the drywall. Inside was a second phone. It was powered on. I didn't unlock it. I didn't even touch it for long. My hands were shaking too badly. I put everything back exactly the way I found it. Raven sat beside me, pressed close, her breathing fast. That night, Michael kissed my forehead and told me he loved me. Raven slept on my chest, refusing to move even when my arm went numb. As I stared into the dark, a realization settled over me, cold and heavy. Raven wasn't reacting to anger. She wasn't reacting to jealousy. She was reacting to intent. Whatever Michael was hiding wasn't in the past. It was unfolding. After I found the phone, nothing felt solid anymore. The house sounded different at night, like every wall was listening. Every creak made my heart jump. Raven never left my side. She followed me from room to room, nails clicking softly on the floor, her body always angled between me and any doorway Michael might walk through. It felt less like companionship and more like protection. Michael changed too. His kindness sharpened, like a blade hidden behind silk. He cooked elaborate dinners and asked too many questions about my day. He started bringing me tea at night, insisting it would help me sleep. Raven wouldn't let the cup near my mouth. She knocked it over once, sending liquid across the floor. Michael exploded. "What is wrong with that dog?" he shouted. Raven barked for the first time since I'd known her. It was loud. Violent. Final. Michael stormed out of the room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled. I thanked him for breakfast. I kissed his cheek. Michael relaxed almost instantly. Whatever he was doing, he believed timing mattered. He believed patience would win. Raven watched silently, her eyes never leaving his hands. While Michael was at work, I went back to the hidden phone. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it. There was no password. That scared me more than anything. Inside were notes, photos, spreadsheets, and recordings. My name appeared everywhere. Dates. Times. Dosages. Observations about my sleep patterns. My moods. My heart rate during exercise. I felt like I was reading a stranger's medical file, except the stranger was me. One folder was labeled Progress. I closed the phone and sat on the floor, struggling to breathe. Raven pressed her head against my chest, grounding me. I realized then that Michael wasn't reacting to chaos. He was controlling it. Carefully. Quietly. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle physical changes. Dizziness. Fatigue. Nausea. Symptoms I had blamed on stress. Raven began sniffing my drinks obsessively. If I tried to eat something Michael prepared, she pushed it away with her nose. Once, she growled so aggressively that I dropped the plate. Michael suggested a doctor visit. "I'm worried about you," he said, eyes soft. "You haven't been yourself." I nodded, pretending to agree, while my pulse thundered in my ears. That night, Raven refused to sleep. She paced the bedroom, stopping every few minutes to sniff the air near the door. At exactly 2:11 a.m., she rushed into the hallway and barked. I followed her downstairs. Michael's office light was on. The door, usually locked, stood open. Inside, the walls were covered in charts. Printed emails. Insurance documents. A large calendar dominated the far wall, with dates circled in red. My birthday. Our anniversary. A date 3 weeks away, marked with a single word. Transfer. Raven growled low and deep. Michael appeared behind me. "You shouldn't be in here," he said calmly. I turned slowly. "What is all this?" He didn't answer right away. He closed the door behind him. Locked it. His expression didn't change, but something cold settled into his eyes. "I needed a contingency plan," he said. "Life is unpredictable." My skin crawled. "A plan for what?" "For moving on," he replied. Cleanly. Raven lunged, slamming into his leg and knocking him backward. I ran. I didn't grab my purse. I didn't grab my phone charger. I grabbed Raven's leash and my keys. Michael shouted my name as I tore out the front door, his voice calm again, almost amused. I drove until my hands went numb. At the police station, my story sounded unreal even to my own ears. But evidence doesn't lie. The second phone. The files. The insurance policies. The recorded notes describing non-lethal trials. Raven sat beside me the entire time, alert and steady. Michael was arrested before sunrise. The toxicology report came back days later. Traces of a sedative. Low doses. Carefully timed. Exactly as described in the notes. Raven hadn't sensed betrayal. She had sensed preparation. And she refused to let it finish. The days after Michael's arrest moved in slow, distorted fragments, like a film played at the wrong speed. I slept in a small guest room at my sister Laura's house, waking every few hours to check the locks, the windows, the shadows. Raven stayed glued to me, her body curved against mine like a shield. Even in sleep, her ears twitched at every unfamiliar sound. I understood then that survival didn't end with escape. It lingered. The investigators visited me repeatedly. Each time, they brought more questions and heavier expressions. Michael hadn't acted on impulse. He'd been building something methodical, deliberate, and chillingly patient. His job in logistics gave him access to shipment records, chemical suppliers, and transportation routes. He'd used that knowledge to source substances that wouldn't immediately raise red flags. Small doses. Controlled intervals. Plausible deniability. One detective slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed spreadsheets recovered from his computer. Columns tracked my meals, my workouts, my sleep cycles, and my stress levels. He'd annotated everything. Smiley faces on compliant days. Red marks when Raven interfered. Seeing my life reduced to data points made my stomach twist. He adjusted when the dog became a variable, the detective said quietly. Variable. That word haunted me. They explained that Michael had opened multiple financial accounts in my name, funneling money into places I'd never heard of. Offshore trusts. Investment shells. He wasn't just planning my death. He was preparing to erase me. Legally, financially, socially. By the time anything went wrong, I would already be gone on paper. Raven lay at my feet during every conversation, her head resting on her paws, eyes never leaving the room. One investigator asked about her training. I told them she'd been certified years earlier as a therapy and service dog for anxiety detection. She could sense chemical changes in the body. Cortisol spikes. Sedatives. Fear responses. That was when everything clicked. Raven hadn't just sensed danger emotionally. She'd smelled it. She'd felt the shifts in my body before I ever noticed them myself. She reacted to patterns Michael thought were invisible. The charges escalated quickly. Attempted murder. Identity theft. Financial exploitation. Coercive control. When I heard the full list, my knees went weak. I had loved this man. Trusted him. Shared a bed with him. The idea that he could sit inches away from me while documenting my decline made my skin crawl. The first time I saw Michael again was at the preliminary hearing. He didn't look angry. He didn't look remorseful. He looked irritated. Like his schedule had been disrupted. His eyes flicked to Raven briefly, then away. Raven didn't growl. She stared. The prosecutor later told me that detail mattered. Animals react honestly. Instinctively. Raven's behavior reinforced the narrative of prolonged threat. As the weeks passed, more details surfaced. Michael had been corresponding with online forums dedicated to estate acceleration. He'd used coded language, asking hypothetical questions about timelines, symptoms, and inheritance loopholes. He'd referred to me as the asset more than once. I stopped eating for a while. Food tasted like cardboard. Laura sat with me through it, reminding me to breathe, to drink water, to sleep. Raven enforced those routines with quiet insistence, nudging my hand or blocking doorways when I tried to withdraw. One afternoon, a detective called with an update. Michael had attempted to negotiate a plea deal. He offered information on others in exchange for reduced sentencing. When that failed, he tried a different tactic. He claimed stress. Claimed misunderstanding. Claimed love. The judge denied bail. That night, I cried for the first time since everything began. Not because I missed him. Because I finally understood how close I'd come to disappearing without anyone knowing why. Raven rested her head on my lap, warm and solid. I buried my fingers in her fur and whispered thank you until my voice broke. The trial date was set. Experts testified about dosing patterns. Financial analysts mapped the money trail. Veterinarians explained Raven's training and behavioral changes. Each piece stacked neatly, forming a structure Michael couldn't dismantle. When the verdict came back guilty on all major counts, the courtroom went silent. Michael showed no reaction. No outburst. No tears. Just a slow blink, like he was recalculating. I didn't look at him. I looked at Raven. Because while he had spent years planning my end, she had spent weeks making sure I survived. And that difference meant everything. By the time we left the courthouse, the air felt lighter, but not safe. I knew healing would take time. Trust would take longer. But as Raven walked beside me, steady and alert, I understood one unshakable truth. Monsters depend on secrecy. Loyalty exposes them. And sometimes, it has four legs and never lies. I didn't go back to the house after the trial. Too many walls remembered things I wanted to forget. I sold it quietly, through an attorney, and moved somewhere smaller, quieter, where the nights didn't echo with footsteps that weren't there. A place where I could breathe without checking locks every 10 minutes. Raven adjusted faster than I did. She always did. The first months were the hardest. Safety felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. I jumped at sudden noises. I slept with lights on. Sometimes I woke up convinced I could hear Michael's voice, calm and controlled, explaining things the way he always had. Raven would lift her head, assess the room, then settle again. Her calm became my anchor. Therapy helped. Not the kind where you recount every detail, but the kind where you relearn how to trust your own perception. For a long time, I blamed myself for not seeing the signs sooner. My therapist reminded me that predators rely on normalcy. They hide inside routine. They exploit love, not ignorance. Michael was sentenced to decades in prison. The judge cited premeditation, psychological cruelty, and the presence of overwhelming evidence. I didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't need to hear his voice again. Closure, I learned, doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from distance. Raven grew older. Her muzzle grayed. Her movements slowed. But her vigilance never faded. Even on quiet mornings, she'd scan the windows before settling in the sun. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping other women leave unsafe situations. I never told my full story. I didn't have to. Fear has a familiar look in the eyes. One afternoon, a woman asked me how I knew when something was wrong. I thought of Raven standing between me and the dark hallway. The pharmacy vial. The hidden phone. The word window circled in red. I listened when something didn't feel right, I said. Even when it didn't make sense yet. That night, I sat on the floor beside Raven, brushing her fur slowly. My life was quieter now. Smaller. But it was mine. No spreadsheets tracking my breaths. No notes measuring my compliance. Just choice. Sometimes, I wonder how close the ending really was. How many days? How many doses? How many adjustments before Michael would have declared his plan complete? That thought still makes my chest tighten. But it no longer controls me. Raven saved me because she didn't doubt herself. She reacted. She warned. She persisted when I hesitated. Loyalty like that doesn't come from training alone. It comes from connection. From presence. From love without conditions or hidden agendas. On the anniversary of the verdict, I took Raven to the beach. She walked slowly beside me, her paws sinking into the sand, her tail wagging gently. We watched the waves roll in and out, endless and indifferent to human schemes. I felt something close to peace. As the sun dipped low, I realized something important. Michael believed control was power. Raven proved that awareness was stronger. I don't tell this story because it's shocking. I tell it because it's quiet. Because danger doesn't always announce itself. Because sometimes the first warning doesn't come from words or proof or fear. Sometimes it comes from a presence that refuses to leave your side. If you ever find yourself doubting what you feel, pay attention to what protects you. Instinct. Intuition. Loyalty. They notice what you're taught to ignore. Raven sleeps at the foot of my bed now, snoring softly, her body relaxed. She doesn't guard as fiercely anymore. She doesn't need to. The threat is gone. The future is open. And every morning I wake up alive, free, and grateful for the warning that saved me. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to listen to your instincts. Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Revo Tales for more stories where hidden truths are finally brought into the light.